The engines of the Gulfstream G were already humming, screaming of wealth and power. But the real turbulence was happening right on the tarmac. Captain Gregory Harrison stood like a sentinel at the top of the air stairs, his face twisted in a sneer that had nothing to do with the wind. He looked down at the woman standing on the asphalt, Beatrice, dressed in a hoodie and worn sneakers, and uttered the words that would end his career, though he didn't know it yet. "I don't care who you claim to be," he spat, blocking the entrance. "Service staff goes through the back, or better yet, not at all." Beatrice didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just reached into her tote bag and pulled out a single, folded sheet of blue legal paper. When Gregory saw the signature at the bottom, the blood didn't just drain from his face, it vanished. Teterboro Airport in New Jersey is a place where the air smells of jet fuel and old money. It isn't like JFK or Newark. There are no long TSA lines, no crying babies in economy class, and no desperate sprints to catch a connecting flight. Teterboro is where the 1% depart for the weekend. It is a world of silent transactions, black SUVs, and discretion. On a grey Tuesday in late October, a black Chevrolet Tahoe pulled up to the security gate of Hangar 4. The vehicle wasn't new. It had a dent in the rear bumper and dust coating the wheel wells, a stark contrast to the gleaming limousines that usually idled in this lane. Beatrice Washington sat in the back seat, her head resting against the cool glass. She was 34 years old, but today she felt 100. She wore a charcoal grey, oversized hoodie, black leggings that had seen better days, and a pair of running shoes that were more for comfort than style. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. To the casual observer, she looked like someone who had just come from a double shift at a warehouse. The driver, a stoic man named Thomas who had served her father for 20 years, caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "We're here, Miss Beatrice," Thomas said softly. "Are you ready?" Beatrice took a deep breath. "No, but let's get it over with." She wasn't here for a vacation. She was here because her father, Jeremiah Washington, the founder of Apex Logistics and Aviation, had died 3 weeks ago. The funeral had been a blur of handshakes from people she didn't know, men in expensive suits who claimed to be her father's closest friends, but whom she had never seen at a single birthday or holiday. Jeremiah had started Apex with a single propeller plane and built it into a global empire. But he had kept his family life fiercely private. Beatrice had spent the last 10 years working as a pediatric nurse in Chicago, intentionally distancing herself from the corporate sharks that swam in her father's tank. She wanted no part of the greed. But now, as the sole heir, the tank was her inheritance. "The board meeting is in London tomorrow," Beatrice murmured, checking her phone. "If I miss this flight, the acquisition deal falls through, and they'll strip the company for parts." "The jet is fueled and prepped," Thomas assured her as the gate opened. "Captain Harrison is the best pilot on the payroll. He'll get you there." Beatrice nodded, clutching her canvas tote bag tighter. Inside it lay the future of the company, along with a few personal effects. She stepped out of the car into the biting wind. The Gulfstream G 50 sat on the tarmac like a white hawk, sleek and predatory. It was her father's pride and joy, the spirit of horizon. She walked toward the plane, alone. Thomas stayed by the car to handle the luggage from the trunk. As Beatrice approached the stairs, she saw a man standing at the top. He was tall, with silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a crisp navy blue pilot's uniform, with 4 gold stripes on the epaulets. He looked every bit the part of the seasoned aviator, commanding, authoritative, and impatient. This was Captain Gregory Harrison. He was checking his watch, tapping his foot against the metal step. When he looked down and saw Beatrice approaching, His expression shifted from professional boredom to open disdain. He didn't see the owner of the company. He didn't see a grieving daughter. He saw a black woman in a hoodie walking toward his multi-million-dollar machine. Beatrice put a foot on the bottom step. "Good morning," she said, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Stop right there," Gregory barked, holding up a hand. His voice was loud, cutting through the ambient noise of the airport. "Deliveries are at the service entrance, around the side of the hangar. You're in a restricted zone." Beatrice paused, blinking. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Gregory said, stepping down one step to loom over her. "We don't order catering this late, and I certainly didn't order anything from—" He looked her up and down, his lip curling slightly. "Whatever service you're from, turn around and walk away before I call security." Beatrice felt a spark of heat in her chest. It was a familiar feeling, one she had felt 1,000 times in hospitals when patients asked to see a real doctor instead of her. But today, fueled by grief and exhaustion, the spark flared hotter. "I'm not catering," Beatrice said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm the passenger for the London flight." Gregory stared at her for a second, and then he laughed. It wasn't a friendly chuckle. It was a dry, mocking sound. "The passenger? Sweetheart, this is a private charter for the executive board of Apex Logistics. The manifest lists a VIP. You look like you're lost on your way to the bus station." "My name is Beatrice Washington," she said, taking another step up. "And I need to get on this plane." Gregory planted his feet firmly, blocking the way. "Washington, common name. Look, I don't know who put you up to this, or if you're some kind of reporter trying to get a scoop on the old man's death, but you are not stepping foot on this aircraft. This is a $40 million machine, not a subway car. Now get lost." The wind whipped across the tarmac, stinging Beatrice's cheeks, but she didn't flinch. The initial shock of the captain's rudeness was fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This was the man her father had trusted with his life? This arrogant gatekeeper? "Captain," Beatrice said, her tone dropping an octave, becoming clinical and sharp. "You are making a significant mistake. I suggest you check your manifest again." Gregory crossed his arms over his chest. "I don't need to check anything. I've been flying for Apex for 15 years. I flew Jeremiah Washington to Davos, to Tokyo, to Paris. I know the family." He leaned in closer, his voice dripping with condescension. Jeremiah Washington was a man of class. He didn't have relations. That looked like you. The insult hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Beatrice clenched her fists inside her hoodie pockets. Her father had kept her out of the spotlight for safety. Yes, but also because he hated the way the media scrutinized black wealth. He had shielded her so well that his own employees didn't recognize her. "You don't know anything about his family," Beatrice said quietly. "Now move aside. I have a board meeting in London in 8 hours. "You have a delusion," Gregory countered. He turned his head toward the cockpit window, signaling his co-pilot, a younger man named Dave, who was watching nervously from above. "Dave, call security. We have a trespasser refusing to vacate the tarmac." Beatrice saw Thomas approaching from the car, wheeling 2 large suitcases. Gregory saw him too and rolled his eyes. "Oh, great. You brought a driver? What is this? A scam? Did you steal the luggage too?" Thomas, a large man with the build of a retired linebacker, stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He looked from Beatrice to Gregory, his face darkening. "Is there a problem, Miss Beatrice?" "The captain seems to think we're stealing the plane, Thomas," Beatrice said, never taking her eyes off Gregory. "Captain Harrison," Thomas rumbled, his voice deep and authoritative. "This is Miss Washington. She is the sole heir to the Washington estate." You are scheduled to fly her to London." Gregory looked at Thomas, then back at Beatrice. For a split second, doubt flickered in his eyes, but his pride extinguished it instantly. He was a senior captain, a man who commanded respect. He wasn't going to be told what to do by a driver and a woman in sweatpants. "I don't care if she's the Queen of England," Gregory snapped. "I have no authorization from the Flight Operations Center to take her. My orders were to prep for the new CEO. I was expecting Mr. Sterling or one of the VPs, not a girl in a hoodie." He pointed a finger at Beatrice's face. "Let me make this simple for you. This is my plane. I am the captain. Under FAA regulations, I have the final authority on who boards and who doesn't. And I am determining that you are a security risk. You are agitated. You are unverified. And frankly, you don't belong here." Beatrice laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "You think I don't belong here because of what I'm wearing? Or is it because of the color of my skin, Captain?" "I'm refusing you because you are a fraud," Gregory shouted, losing his composure. "Now get off my stairs before I physically remove you." At that moment, an airport security vehicle, lights flashing, sped across the tarmac and screeched to a halt near the jet. Two officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts. "What's the issue here?" the lead officer asked, looking between the pilot and the woman. "These two are trespassing," Gregory announced triumphantly. "They are harassing the flight crew and attempting to board a private aircraft without authorization. I want them removed and arrested." The officer turned to Beatrice. "Ma'am, is this true? Do you have identification?" Beatrice looked at the officer, then back at Gregory. The pilot was smirking now. He thought he had won. He thought he had put her in her place. He was envisioning the story he would tell his buddies at the bar later, how he stopped a couple of grifters from hijacking the jet. "I have identification," Beatrice said calmly. She took the canvas tote bag off her shoulder and unzipped it. "Don't reach for anything," the officer warned, hand twitching toward his taser. "I'm just getting a document," Beatrice said, moving slowly. "The captain said he needed authorization. He said he needed to know who owns the plane." Gregory snorted. "A piece of paper isn't going to change the fact that you're not on the list." Beatrice pulled out a blue folder. It wasn't just a ticket. It was a thick, bound, legal document embossed with the seal of the state of New York and the official stamp of the Federal Aviation Administration. She walked up 2 steps, ignoring Gregory's attempt to block her, and shoved the document against his chest. "Read it," she commanded. Her voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was the voice of a CEO. Gregory grabbed the folder, ready to throw it back at her. But the first page caught his eye. It was a certificate of transfer of ownership. Aircraft registration, N652W make model, Gulfstream G650 transfer date, October 12, 2023. Previous owner, Jeremiah Washington, deceased. Current owner, Beatrice Washington. And below that, a notarized letter from the Board of Directors of Apex Logistics, confirming the immediate appointment of Beatrice Washington as interim CEO and chairperson. Gregory stared at the paper. The wind ruffled the pages, revealing a photocopy of Beatrice's passport and a letter of authority that superseded even the Flight Operations Center. He looked at the name. Beatrice Washington. He looked at the woman. He looked back at the document. His face, previously flushed with anger and righteousness, began to drain of color. It started at his cheeks and went down to his neck. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the gut. He hadn't just refused a passenger. He had just tried to arrest the woman who signed his paychecks. "Well?" Beatrice asked, tilting her head. "Does that document clarify who belongs on this plane, Captain?" Gregory swallowed hard. His hands were shaking slightly. Ms. Washington." "That's right," she said. "And you just told the owner of this $40 million machine to get lost." The security officer, sensing the shift in power, stepped back. Is everything in order here, folks?" Beatrice didn't look at the officer. She kept her eyes locked on Gregory. "No, officer. Everything is not in order. Because this pilot was just leaving." Gregory's eyes widened. "Ms. Washington, please, I didn't know. You have to understand. We have strict protocols. I was just trying to protect the asset. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me with respect." Beatrice cut him off. "Is that it? If I had walked up here in a Chanel suit, you would have ushered me to my seat. But because I look like this, I'm a security risk?" No, it's not that," Gregory stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold wind. "It's just standard procedure." "Standard procedure is to check the manifest and ask for ID," Beatrice said coldly. "Not to insult and threaten." She reached out and plucked the document from his frozen hands. "Step aside, Captain Harrison." Gregory didn't move. He was paralyzed by the magnitude of his error. He had 20 years of flight experience. He was 3 years away from a full pension, and he had just incinerated it all in 5 minutes of arrogance. "I said," Beatrice's voice was like ice, "step aside." Gregory stepped aside. He had no choice. He pressed his back against the railing of the air stairs, making himself as small as possible, though his ego was still taking up too much space. Beatrice walked past him without a glance, the fabric of her hoodie brushing against his pristine uniform. Thomas followed, effortlessly hoisting the heavy suitcases up the stairs. As he passed Gregory, the large driver stopped. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the pilot for a lingering second, a look that promised retribution if the flight was anything less than perfect. Gregory swallowed hard, adjusting his tie, his hands trembling. "Dave!" Gregory hissed into his headset as he scurried into the cockpit. "Cancel the security call. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them anything. Just get them away from the plane." Inside the cabin of the Spirit of Horizon, the atmosphere was stifling. The interior was a palace of cream leather and mahogany, smelling of expensive polished wood and fresh orchids. It was a world Beatrice had avoided for years, preferring the antiseptic smell of the hospital ward. She sat in the main VIP seat, a plush recliner that faced a large monitor. She dropped her tote bag onto the adjacent seat, the bag that Gregory had mocked, and rubbed her temples. A flight attendant appeared from the galley. Her name tag read Sarah. She was young, perhaps 25, and her hands were shaking as she held a silver tray. She had watched the entire confrontation from the porthole window. Good morning, Ms. Washington," Sarah stammered. Can I get you anything before we taxi? Champagne? Coffee?" Beatrice looked up. She saw the fear in the girl's eyes. It was the fear of collateral damage, the fear that the new boss was going to fire everyone in a rage. Beatrice softened her expression. "Water, please, Sarah. Just cold water. And please breathe. You didn't do anything wrong." Sarah let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 5 minutes. "Of course, Ma'am. Right away." As Sarah hurried away, the intercom crackled to life. It was Gregory. His voice was strained, lacking its usual smooth, pilot-speaking cadence. Ms. Washington, this is Captain Harrison. We are cleared for departure. Flight time to London. Luton is 6 hours and 40 minutes. We expect a smooth ride. Apologies for the delay." Beatrice didn't respond. She simply fastened her seatbelt. She knew Gregory wanted her to say something, to absolve him or to fire him, just to break the tension. But she would do neither, not yet. She needed him to fly the plane, and she needed him to sweat. As the Gulfstream taxied to the runway, the engines roaring to life, Beatrice opened the blue folder again. She looked at her father's signature. Jeremiah Washington. He had been a hard man, a man who built an empire by crushing his competition. But he had taught Beatrice one crucial lesson about power. Never reveal your full hand until the deal is signed. Gregory Harrison thought his only crime was rudeness. He thought he was in trouble for a customer service failure. He had no idea what was actually in the tote bag sitting next to her. The jet accelerated, pressing Beatrice back into the soft leather. They lifted off, banking sharply over the grey New Jersey landscape, turning east towards the Atlantic. Beatrice watched the ground fall away. "You built all of this, Dad," she whispered to the empty cabin. "Now let's see if I can keep them from stealing it." 2 hours into the flight, the cabin was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. Beatrice had her laptop open. She was reviewing the board meeting agenda. The sharks were circling. Richard Sterling, the vice president of operations, was leading the charge to sell the company to a private equity firm. He argued that without Jeremiah, the company lacked direction. Richard Sterling. The name made Beatrice's skin crawl. He was her father's right-hand man, but she had always sensed a viper lurking behind his expensive smile. The cockpit door opened. Beatrice didn't look up, but she sensed the presence. Captain Gregory Harrison walked into the cabin. He had removed his hat and smoothed his hair. He was putting on his charming pilot mask, the one he used to schmooze wealthy clients. He clearly thought that enough time had passed for the tension to dissipate. "Ms. Washington," Gregory said, his voice oily. "I just wanted to come back and personally check on your comfort. Is the temperature to your liking?" Beatrice continued typing. "The temperature is fine." Gregory didn't leave. He stood by her seat, shifting his weight. "Look, about earlier, I really must apologize again. We've had some security threats lately. Corporate espionage, you understand. I was just being hyper-vigilant. It's my job to protect the company." Beatrice finally stopped typing. She slowly closed the laptop lid and turned her chair to face him. Her expression was unreadable. "Is that what you call it, Captain? Protection?" "Yes, absolutely," Gregory said, gaining a little confidence. "I take my duties very seriously. In fact, Mr. Sterling, Richard Sterling, you know him, he and I often discuss the security protocols. He's a good friend of mine. We golf together in West Palm Beach." Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Gregory smirked slightly. He was dropping names now, trying to subtly remind her that he had powerful friends. It was a classic power play. You might be the owner, but I'm friends with the guy who actually runs things. "Oh yes," Gregory continued, leaning against the bulkhead casually. "Richard, Mr. Sterling, has been very concerned about the transition. He mentioned that the company needs steady hands during this time. He values loyalty. I've been loyal to Apex for 15 years. "Loyalty," Beatrice repeated the word, tasting it. "That's an interesting word, Captain." She reached into her tote bag. Instead of the ownership papers, she pulled out a thick, leather-bound notebook. It was old, the corners frayed. This was her father's personal ledger. Jeremiah Washington didn't trust computers with his most sensitive observations. He wrote everything down. Beatrice opened the book to a bookmark she had placed earlier. "Captain, you mentioned you've been with us for 15 years, and you manage the fuel contracts for the Northeast region, correct?" Gregory blinked, confused by the pivot. Yes. As senior captain, I oversee the fueling logistics for the private fleet. And you insist on fueling exclusively at the shadowy Global Jet A provider in New Jersey, even though their rates are 15% higher than the market average, Beatrice read from the page, her finger tracing the handwriting. Gregory went rigid. That? Well, they offer premium service. Faster turnaround. You get what you pay for. Do you? Beatrice looked up, her eyes piercing him. Because according to my father's notes, and the private investigator's report stapled to the back of this page, Global Jet A is owned by a shell company registered to a GH Holdings. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. GH Holdings, Gregory Harrison. Is that correct? Gregory's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The charming pilot mask shattered completely, revealing the terrified fraud underneath. That is preposterous, he squeaked. I don't know where you got that information. My father knew everything, Gregory, Beatrice said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He knew you were skimming off the top. He knew you were charging the company for premium catering and loading budget meals. He knew about the maintenance delays in Paris that were actually just you taking a long weekend with your mistress. She slammed the book shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. He kept you employed because you were a good pilot, and frankly, he didn't care about the pennies you were stealing. He called it the cost of doing business with small men. Gregory was gripping the back of the empty seat so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like he was about to vomit. But I am not my father, Beatrice said, standing up. She was shorter than him, but in that moment she towered over him. I count every penny, and I have zero tolerance for small men who disrespect me on my own tarmac. Miss Washington, please, Gregory begged, his voice cracking. I can explain. I can pay it back. Richard, Mr. Sterling, he approved the fuel contracts. He signed off on them. Beatrice smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. Oh, Richard Sterling was involved in the embezzlement? He signed the approvals? Gregory nodded frantically, throwing his friend under the bus to save himself. Yes, he told me which vendors to use. He gets a cut, too. I'm just the middleman. Beatrice sat back down, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. Thank you, Captain. That is exactly what I needed to hear. She pointed to the cockpit. Now, go back to the front and fly this plane. If you land us safely in London, I might let you resign with your pilot's license intact. If you give me one moment of turbulence, I'll hand this ledger to the FBI the moment we touch down. Gregory stared at her, his eyes wide with horror. He realized too late that he had just handed her the weapon she needed to win the war in London. He turned and stumbled back toward the cockpit, a broken man. Beatrice watched him go. She picked up her phone, which was connected to the jet's Wi-Fi. She opened an encrypted messaging app and typed a message to the head of Apex Security, a man she knew she could trust. Secure the files in Sterling's office. I have a witness. She looked out the window at the clouds below. The hard part wasn't over. The flight was just the commute. The real war was waiting in the boardroom. But for the first time since her father died, Beatrice felt ready. The landing at London Luton Airport was the smoothest of Captain Gregory Harrison's career. It was the kind of landing where you didn't feel the wheels touch the tarmac, only the gentle deceleration of the thrust reversers. It was a landing born of pure terror. As the engines whined down to a stop, the cabin door opened. The cool, damp English air rushed in. Gregory stood by the cockpit door, his hat in his hands, his face pale and clammy. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Miss Washington, he mumbled as Beatrice gathered her things. I hope the flight was satisfactory. Beatrice didn't pause. She slung her tote bag over her shoulder, the same bag that contained the evidence of his ruin. Thomas, she said, bypassing the pilot entirely, please ensure the luggage is loaded into the car immediately. We have 45 minutes to get to the city. Yes, ma'am, Thomas said, brushing past Gregory with a shoulder check that nearly knocked the pilot over. Beatrice descended the stairs. A black Mercedes S-Class was waiting on the tarmac, flanked by 2 more security vehicles. Standing by the car was a woman in a sharp grey suit, holding a tablet. This was Eleanor Vance, Apex's London-based legal counsel. She was one of the few people Jeremiah Washington had trusted implicitly. "Beatrice," Eleanor said, opening the car door herself. She didn't smile. The situation was too grave for that. "It's good to see you. You look like your father." "I feel like him today, Eleanor," Beatrice replied, sliding into the leather seat. "What's the status?" Eleanor climbed in beside her as the convoy began to move. "It's bad. Richard Sterling has the votes. He's convinced the board that you are an absentee heir with no interest in the business. He's pushing for a rapid sale to Vanguard Capital, a private equity firm known for stripping assets. He claims the stock will tank if we don't sell by noon." Beatrice watched the grey highway blur past. "He thinks I'm an absentee heir." "He thinks you're a nurse who is out of her depth," Eleanor corrected. "He's planning to offer you a ceremonial position on the board, non-voting, of course, and a payout. He thinks you'll take the money and run back to Chicago." Beatrice touched the tote bag resting on her lap. "He's in for a surprise. Did you get the file I sent from the plane?" "I did," Eleanor said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. "Our forensic accountants are cross-referencing the captain's confession with the London accounts right now. Beatrice, if this holds up, Sterling isn't just getting fired. He's going to prison." "It will hold up," Beatrice said softly, "because I'm not just going to fire him. I'm going to make an example of him." The car pulled up to the Apex Logistics headquarters in the heart of London's financial district. It was a glass and steel monolith that scraped the sky, a testament to the power Jeremiah Washington had wielded. As Beatrice walked into the lobby, the atmosphere changed. The security guards, who usually nodded respectfully, looked confused. They didn't recognize her. The receptionist, a young man with a perfectly gelled haircut, looked up from his phone with a frown. "Deliveries are in the rear," he said automatically, echoing the pilot's words from 7 hours ago. Beatrice didn't stop. She didn't even slow down. Thomas and Eleanor flanked her like a phalanx. "Excuse me," the receptionist called out, standing up. "You can't just walk in here. Who are you?" Beatrice stopped at the elevator bank. She turned slowly. "I own the building," she said simply. Then she stepped into the elevator, and the doors slid shut, leaving the receptionist with his mouth open. On the 40th floor, the hallway was lined with oil paintings of airplanes and ships. At the end of the hall were the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. Beatrice checked her reflection in the glass panel of a framed photo. She was still wearing her hoodie and leggings. She hadn't changed. Eleanor looked at her with concern. "Are you sure you don't want to freshen up? Maybe borrow a blazer," Eleanor asked gently. "Appearance is currency in this room." "No," Beatrice said. "They need to see me exactly as I am. They need to see that I don't need a suit to be powerful. Besides," she smirked, "I want them to underestimate me for 5 more minutes." She pushed the doors open. The conversation in the boardroom died instantly. 12 men and 2 women sat around a massive oval table. They were the titans of the industry, bankers, investors, and seasoned executives. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling. Sterling was a handsome man in his 50s, with a tan that came from winters in St. Bart's, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was mid-sentence, pointing at a projection screen showing a declining stock graph. "And that is why," Sterling was saying, "we must act." He stopped as Beatrice entered. A silence heavy with judgment descended on the room. Eyes darted to her sneakers, her messy bun, her worn-out tote bag. Sterling stood up, smoothing his Italian silk tie. "Beatrice," he boomed, his voice dripping with faux warmth. "We weren't expecting you to join the technical session. We thought you'd prefer to rest at the hotel after your loss. My deepest condolences again." He gestured to a chair in the corner, away from the table. "Please take a seat. We're just wrapping up the boring financial stuff. We'll have the settlement papers ready for your signature in an hour." Beatrice walked past the chair in the corner. She walked straight to the head of the table. Sterling chuckled nervously. "Beatrice, honey, that's the chairman's seat." "I know," Beatrice said. "Move." The room gasped. A few board members exchanged shocked glances. Sterling's smile faltered, his jaw tightening. "Beatrice," Sterling said, his voice lowering to a patronizing tone. "I know you're grieving. You're emotional. But let the adults handle the business. You're a nurse. You help sick children. That's noble. But this is global logistics. It's complicated. Move," Beatrice repeated, "or I will have security remove you." Sterling laughed, looking around the room for support. "Security? Beatrice, I run this company. I am the acting CEO." "Acting," Beatrice said. "Keyword." She threw her tote bag onto the polished mahogany table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the surface and knocking over Sterling's glass of water. The water spilled onto his papers, soaking his prepared speech. "What the hell?" Sterling snapped, jumping back. Beatrice unzipped the bag. She didn't pull out papers this time. She pulled out a small, portable projector and plugged it into the table's HDMI port, overriding Sterling's presentation. "You say I'm just a nurse," Beatrice said to the room, her voice steady and projecting to the back wall. "And you're right. I am a nurse. And in my line of work, we have a procedure called triage. We assess the damage, we identify the infection, and we cut it out to save the patient." She hit a button on the remote. The screen behind her changed. It wasn't a stock chart. It was a video. A shaky cell phone video taken inside the cockpit of a Gulfstream GS650 just 3 hours ago. On the screen, Captain Gregory Harrison looked disheveled and terrified. He was looking directly into the camera. "State your name," Beatrice's voice came from behind the camera in the video. "Gregory Harrison, Senior Pilot, Apex Logistics." "And the fuel contracts, Gregory. Tell us about the fuel contracts." The board members leaned in. Sterling went pale. He lunged for the remote. "Turn this off. This is private company property. You can't—" "Sit down, Richard," shouted Lord Covington, the oldest board member and the largest shareholder. "I want to hear this." On the screen, Gregory spilled everything. We overcharge the company by 15% on fuel and maintenance across the Atlantic fleet. The difference is routed to a shell company in the Caymans called Blue Horizon Consultants. "And who owns Blue Horizon Consultants?" the video Beatrice asked. Gregory hesitated on screen, wiping sweat from his brow. "Richard Sterling, and me. He gives me a 10% cut to keep quiet and handle the paperwork." The video ended. The room was so silent you could hear the air conditioning humming. Beatrice turned to look at Sterling. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked like a ghost. He was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "That's a lie," Sterling whispered, his voice trembling. "The pilot he's unstable. He's a drunk. I fired him weeks ago." "Really?" Beatrice asked, pulling a document from her bag. "Because here is the flight manifest from this morning, signed by you, authorizing him to fly the Spirit of Horizon. And here," she slapped another document down, "is a bank transfer record I pulled from your office files while you were having your morning coffee. $500,000 transferred to Blue Horizon last month alone." She looked around the table at the stunned board members. "You were told I was an absentee heir," Beatrice said. "You were told I didn't care. But while you were planning to sell my father's legacy for parts, I was doing the math. Richard Sterling has stolen approximately $12 million from this company over the last 5 years. He is driving the stock price down intentionally so he can buy it back cheap through his private equity partners." She turned back to Sterling. "You didn't just underestimate me, Richard. You underestimated how much my father taught me. He taught me that when you catch a rat, you don't negotiate." Beatrice pointed to the door. "You're fired. Effective immediately, and the police are waiting in the lobby." Sterling looked around the room, desperate for an ally. But the sharks smelled blood. Lord Covington stood up slowly. "I move to immediately terminate Richard Sterling's contract for cause," Covington said, his voice icy, "and to appoint Beatrice Washington as permanent CEO." "Seconded," said the woman to his left, without hesitation. "All in favor?" Every hand in the room went up. Sterling slumped into his chair, defeated. The arrogance, the power, the sneer, it all evaporated, leaving just a small, greedy man in an expensive suit. Beatrice leaned in close to him, so only he could hear. "You should have let me use the service entrance," she whispered. The heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom slammed shut, cutting off Richard Sterling's final, desperate screams. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a thunderclap, charged, electric, and smelling faintly of ozone. Beatrice stood at the head of the table. She hadn't sat down yet. Her hand rested on the leather-bound ledger that had served as her weapon, her shield, and her gavel. 12 pairs of eyes were fixed on her. These were men and women who controlled billions of dollars in assets, titans of logistics and finance, who could topple governments with a phone call. And yet, in this moment, they looked like school children waiting for the principal's verdict. Lord Covington, the man who had initiated the vote to terminate Sterling, cleared his throat. It sounded like a cannon blast in the quiet room. "Ms. Washington," he began, his tone cautious, stripped of the condescension he had worn only an hour ago. "The board appreciates your intervention. Sterling's actions were..." "Predictable," Beatrice cut him off. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "They were predictable to anyone who was paying attention. My father paid attention. Which begs the question, what were the rest of you doing?" She walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each member. She saw fear in some, respect in others, and in a few, the calculating glint of opportunism. "You assumed I was a nurse from Chicago who knew nothing about global logistics," Beatrice continued, her sneakers squeaking softly on the plush carpet, a sound that was infinitely more intimidating than the click of high heels because it reminded them of how badly they had misjudged her. "You thought you could hand me a check and send me away while you stripped this company for parts. But here is the reality. I know how to read a patient's vitals, and this company is sick." She stopped behind the chair of a board member named Arthur Penhaligon, a man who had been Sterling's closest ally until 5 minutes ago. Arthur flinched as she placed a hand on the back of his chair. "We are not selling to Vanguard Capital," Beatrice declared, her voice ringing off the wood-paneled walls. "We are not liquidating the fleet. Instead, we are going to undergo a complete forensic audit. Every contract, every fuel receipt, every maintenance log from the last 5 years will be reviewed. If you were complicit in Sterling's schemes, I suggest you resign before the auditors find you. If you were merely negligent, wake up. The free ride is over." Arthur swallowed hard, sweat beading on his bald head. And the leadership? Who will steer the ship during this audit?" Beatrice walked back to the head of the table. She looked at the empty chair, her father's chair. For years she had run from it. She had viewed it as a throne of greed. Now she saw it for what it was, a responsibility, a way to protect the thousands of honest employees who relied on Apex to feed their families. She sat down. "I will," Beatrice said. Meeting adjourned. The next 3 weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and caffeine. Beatrice didn't go back to Chicago. She moved into her father's London townhouse and turned the Apex headquarters into a war room. The purge, as the financial press dubbed it, was brutal but necessary. Eleanor, the company's loyal legal counsel, worked side by side with Beatrice. Together, they unearthed a network of corruption that went deeper than just Sterling and the pilot. It turned out Sterling had been taking kickbacks from catering companies, hangar leasing agents, and even the uniform suppliers. Beatrice fired them all. She didn't do it with joy, but she did it with surgical precision. She was reclaiming her father's legacy, scrubbing the tarnish off the Apex name until it shone again. But the final piece of the puzzle lay back across the ocean at Teterboro Airport. On a crisp November morning, Beatrice returned to the United States. She didn't fly commercial. She flew on the Spirit of Horizon, but this time the flight was different. The cabin didn't feel like a stranger's house anymore. It felt like her office. When the jet touched down in New Jersey, the sky was a brilliant, hard blue. The wind was biting, whipping across the tarmac with the same ferocity it had on the day she was denied boarding. Beatrice stepped onto the airstairs. She paused, taking a deep breath of the jet fuel-scented air. She looked down at the spot where Captain Gregory Harrison had stood, blocking her path, sneering at her hoodie. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Ms. Washington," a voice called out. Beatrice descended the stairs. Waiting for her was Thomas, her driver, standing next to the black SUV. But standing next to him was the airport's general manager, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson. "Welcome back, Ms. Washington," Henderson said, wringing his hands. I wanted to personally apologize for the incident last month. It was unacceptable. We have retrained all our ground staff on VIP protocols." "It wasn't a protocol failure, Mr. Henderson," Beatrice said, buttoning her trench coat against the chill. "It was a character failure, but I appreciate the sentiment. We have handled the personnel involved," Henderson added quickly. "Actually, the former captain is clearing out his locker in Hangar 4 right now. Security is escorting him off the premises permanently." Beatrice stopped moving toward the car. "Is he?" "Yes, ma'am. If you'd prefer to wait in the VIP lounge until he's gone." "No," Beatrice said. Her expression hardened. "I want to see the hangar." She walked across the tarmac, her coat billowing behind her. Thomas and Henderson scrambled to keep up. She didn't head for the luxury lounge with its espresso machines and leather sofas. She headed for the service entrance, the very place Gregory had told her to go. Inside the hangar, the air was cold and echoed with the sounds of mechanics working. In the corner, near the pilot's ready room, a scene was unfolding. Gregory Harrison was standing by a row of grey lockers. He was not the silver-haired god of the sky anymore. He was wearing civilian clothes, a pair of ill-fitting jeans, and a windbreaker that looked 2 sizes too small. He was holding a cardboard box. 2 airport security guards, the same ones he had tried to order to arrest Beatrice, were now standing over him, their arms crossed. "Hurry it up, Harrison," one guard said. "You're holding up the shift change." "I'm just looking for my logbook," Gregory muttered, his hands shaking as he rummaged through the locker. "I need it to apply for other jobs." "You don't have a license, Greg," the guard laughed. "What do you need a logbook for? Flying kites?" Beatrice slowed her approach, her footsteps silent on the concrete floor. She watched him. This man, who had wielded his authority like a club, was now being bullied by the very system he had tried to exploit. It was pathetic, it was tragic, and it was entirely self-inflicted. Gregory pulled a battered black book from the locker and dropped it into his box. He turned around to leave, and that was when he saw her. He froze. The box nearly slipped from his fingers. Beatrice stood 10 feet away, flanked by the general manager and her bodyguard. She looked impeccable, radiant with the kind of authority that can't be bought, only earned. Gregory's face crumbled. He looked at the guards, then at Henderson, and finally, he couldn't help but look at Beatrice. The shame was palpable. It radiated off him in waves. "Ms. Washington," he choked out. Beatrice didn't smile. She didn't frown. She looked at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. "Mr. Harrison," she said. Gregory took a step forward, but Thomas stepped in front of Beatrice, a wall of protective muscle. Gregory stopped, shrinking back. "I just wanted to say, I know I messed up. I know I did wrong. But they took my pension. They took my license. I have a mortgage. My wife—" He was begging. The arrogance was dead, buried under the rubble of his career. "I was wondering," Gregory continued, his voice cracking, if there was any position. "In the warehouse, in dispatch, I know the systems. I worked here for 15 years. Please, I'll do anything." The silence in the hangar stretched. The mechanics had stopped working. Everyone was watching. The king of the tarmac was begging the woman he had tried to ban for a minimum wage job. Beatrice looked at the cardboard box in his hands. She thought about the millions he had helped steal. She thought about the sneer on his face when he called her a service worker. "You said something to me, Gregory, on the stairs that day," Beatrice said softly. Her voice carried clearly in the cavernous space. "You said, service staff goes through the back, or better yet, not at all." Gregory flinched as if she had slapped him. "You didn't just break the rules," Beatrice said. "You broke the trust. My father trusted you with his life. I trusted you to fly me safely, and you looked at me and saw nothing but a target because of my skin and my clothes." She took a step closer, Thomas moving aside to let her pass. "I believe in second chances, Gregory," she said. Hope flared in Gregory's eyes. He straightened up slightly. "You do?" "Yes," Beatrice said. "But not here." The hope died instantly, replaced by a crushing despair. "You are a liability," she said, her voice cold and final. "You are dishonest, you are prejudiced, and you are weak. If I hired you to sweep the floors, I would have to count the brooms every night. No, Gregory, there is no place for you at Apex. Not now. Not ever." She turned to the security guards. "Escort him off the property. If he returns, charge him with trespassing." "Yes, Ms. Washington," the guard said in unison, grabbing Gregory by the arms. "Wait, please!" Gregory shouted as they dragged him toward the exit. "Beatrice, please!" She didn't turn back. She didn't watch him go. She had already moved on. Beatrice turned to Mr. Henderson. "Who is flying the Spirit for the return leg to London? Next week. I need to review the crew roster." "Ah, yes," Henderson said, scrambling to open a folder. "We have hired a new chief pilot. She comes highly recommended. Top of her class at the academy. 10 years of commercial experience. Spotless record." "Introduce me," Beatrice said. They walked out of the hangar and back to the jet. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was a woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight, professional bun. She wore the navy blue uniform of an Apex captain, and it fit her perfectly, crisp, clean, and dignified. She stood at attention as Beatrice approached. "Ms. Washington," the pilot said, extending a hand. "Captain Maria Gonzalez. It is an honor to fly for you." Beatrice took her hand. The grip was firm, confident. There was no hesitation, no judgment in Maria's eyes, just professionalism. "The honor is mine, Captain Gonzalez," Beatrice said. "My father built this plane, but I'm trusting you to keep it in the sky. Do you know why?" Maria paused, considering the question. "Because I'm qualified." "Because you're honest," Beatrice said. "I read your file. You reported a safety violation at your last airline, even though it cost you a promotion. You put safety over politics." Maria smiled. "I put lives over profit, Ma'am." Beatrice returned the smile. It was the first genuine smile she had shown in weeks. "That is exactly the kind of pilot Apex needs. Welcome aboard." Beatrice climbed the stairs. She didn't look back at the fence where Gregory was likely standing, watching his old life fly away. She entered the cabin. She sat in the VIP seat. She placed the tote bag, the battered canvas bag that had started it all, on the seat next to her. She didn't need to hide it anymore. The engines roared to life. The vibration hummed through the floor, a feeling of immense, controlled power. Beatrice looked out the window as the plane began to taxi. She saw the runway stretching out before her, a long grey ribbon leading into the sky. She wasn't just the daughter of Jeremiah Washington anymore. She wasn't just a nurse. She was the CEO. She was the decision-maker. She was the one who decided who flew and who stayed on the ground. As the G650 thundered down the runway and lifted its nose toward the clouds, Beatrice Washington closed her eyes and whispered a single word to the ghost of her father and to the woman she had become. "Higher." Wow, talk about a hard landing for Captain Harrison. Beatrice really showed that true power isn't about shouting or bullying. It's about integrity and knowing exactly when to pull the receipts. She cleared the house, protected her legacy, and gave that toxic pilot a one-way ticket to the unemployment line. I want to know what you think. Was Beatrice too harsh denying him a job in the warehouse? Or did he deserve to lose absolutely everything for what he did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story, please hit that like button and share this video with a friend who loves a good karma story. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories of justice served cold. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.